It's been a month in the making, ladies and gentlemen, but here we are. We've made it to my top 5 favorite Stephen King books. Stay tuned and let's figure them out. Let's get started. Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Zach with Zach's Books, and today I've got for you my top 5 Stephen King books I've ever read. It's been a month in the making to finally tell you my top 5. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for it, asking for it. It's about time I finally showed you the top 5. They're really good books. I really enjoyed them. And hopefully these are in your top 5 or a top list of yours. But enough babbling on. I'm going to show them to you. So let's get started with number 5. If you guys are interested in these books, I will have them linked down below. If you wanted to check them out, give them a read yourself. I will say 3 of these are maybe predictable. The other 2 might not be. And it's just kind of where those top 3 are going to place. But let's get started with number 5. And number 5 is The Long Walk by Richard Bachman / Stephen King. This book was the first one I read all the way through on my Stephen King journey that I started back in October, November, maybe even December. I don't remember. I think I have it on my Goodreads. Check it out. We'll have that down below too. I really, really like this book. It's about a group of 100 boys who have to go on this walk. And the key is to outlast everyone else. You get 3 warnings, and on the 3rd warning, something happens. I don't feel the need to spoil it for you, but just know that it's a survival story with 100 boys, and only one can win. So you put that together yourself. I'm not going to say it, but it's pretty obvious. But I really enjoyed it. The story of Garrity going through this walk and like befriending a whole bunch of people. Like he makes friends with like 12 of them. And like you just feel the unsettlingness of one of these boys is going to win, and the rest of them are just not going to. So it makes it a little more, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. It gives you that feeling of dread, like you don't want this to happen to these group of boys, but you know it's going to happen. And the ending is also a little out there. This is actually, fun fact, this is actually the first book that King actually wrote, but Carrie was the first one that was published, which was a fun fact I actually didn't know. But, I mean, overall, this is probably my favorite Bachman book, and it's a really good read. I highly recommend this. This was like a 5-star right off the bat, no question about it. And just to kind of put it in perspective, this was the very first one I read, like I said earlier. This is the very first one I read on my journey. And I've read over, I think, 40 or 45 Stephen King books now. And it has stayed in my top 5 through all of this. And with it being at number 5, am I worried with it being kicked out? I don't think so, because I feel like I've read a lot of the better ones, or at least better rated ones already. But I don't think this one's going to get kicked out of the top 5. I think this top 5 is relatively set. So, but yeah, I highly recommend this. Really, really good book. And that's number 5, The Long Walk, Richard Bachman, Stephen King. Alright, coming in at number 4 is going to be the one that's probably going to surprise a lot of people. And it's just, I see this as like a really, really well-written book through and out. And I don't know why it's not really talked about as much as some of the other ones, like the other top 3 I'm going to have. And that is Christine. This book was so effing good. It baffles me that this is not talked about as much. I know some of the people didn't like it because there's that change in narrative where you go from first person to third person to first person again. And I think it worked. And the car is just, if you actually look up a 58 Plymouth Fury, the car's pretty sexy. I want one. Like if I could have this car and just live at the Overlook Hotel, I'd be set. You know, that's my life. I want that. Obviously, with not the bad things happening at the Overlook, but you know what I mean. But yeah, this was a really good book. The movie doesn't do the justice of the friendship between Arnie and Dennis as much as in the book, because you get that more depicted, like they've been childhood friends since, well, childhood. And Dennis just seeing the descent of Arnie when he gets this car, it's unsettling. It's really like sad for him, because it's like, yeah, this is kid who gets picked on all the time, but I've been his friend throughout, you know, grade school, middle school, high school, junior high, I think is what they used to refer to middle school as. But this was a really good book. I highly recommend this. This got 5 stars from me. And I don't know why it's not talked about as much as some of the other books. I can't stress that enough. Talk about Christine. Like, come on. Let's go. Yeah, not much else to really say about it. Like I said, it got the 5-star rating for me. And this was the most recent one that I read that's in my top 5. And I just absolutely love this book. It's my hidden gem. It's my diamond in the rough, if you will. So maybe it'll become yours. Maybe it'll come into your top 5 Stephen King books. Or maybe be your top Stephen King book. Give it a read, though. I really recommend that you read this book. So that is Christine, coming in at number 4 in my top 5. Alright guys, the top 3 are what I'll say, since you haven't heard me talk about them, probably predictable, but the order might not be the order you think they might be in. They also could be, I don't know. But this coming in at number 3 is probably the eeriest and scariest Stephen King book I read. It's just an unsettling book throughout the entire thing. And that is Pet Sematary by good old Stephen King. This one was just really creepy. It's about Louis Creed, who moves into this house with his family. There's Gage the baby, Church the cat, and he's got a wife and a daughter. I can't remember their names. Judd Crandall is the old man who lives across the road, and he's the university's new doctor. And what ends up happening is the little girl does not know about death quite yet. And so it's kind of the story about like what you like teaching about a death about something. So like if you have a younger sibling and say your grandpa dies and they don't know what death is, it's kind of like explaining that, but Stephen King does what Stephen King does and pushes it further into trying to avoid telling that person and bringing that person back to life. And he does it with the Pet Sematary. So Church the cat ends up getting hit by a truck because the road that separates Judd Crandall's house and the Creed's house is like a super busy, like one-way road, two-way road, and like trucks and semis are going through there constantly. And what ends up happening is Church gets hit while the mom, the daughter, and Gage are all in Chicago visiting her parents. And so Judd ends up calling Lewis and saying, hey, I think I've got your cat in my yard over here not moving. And so they go over, ends up being Church, and Lewis is like, okay, well, how the heck am I supposed to tell my daughter about this? You know, what, she doesn't know anything about this. And then Judd's like, okay, I'll tell you about this place. And so they go beyond the Pet Sematary and they bury Church there. And it's on an ancient Indian burial ground. And Judd says that just bury the cat there. You'll know what's going on. Next day, Church comes back and looks all gross and disgusting because obviously it's dead, but comes back to life. And then Judd explains to Lewis about the Pet Sematary. You bury something up there, you have to bury it yourself, you bury your own. And that thing comes back, but it doesn't come back the right way. But he doesn't tell him that till later when the cat kind of starts acting like a total bitch. And so you go through the story and the girl was just like, you know, why does Church smell like crap all the time? Like, I've given her like 3 baths. Like, why does she smell so bad? And so they're having a family picnic, and something happens in the story, and you can kind of guess where it goes from there. That's all I'm going to leave it at, because I don't want to spoil this book, because it is a really, 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 really good book. And I really recommend it. But yeah, I mean, I gave this 5 stars without any doubt. And I think my top 3 is never going to get broken. I just don't see that happening. So, I recommend it, 5 stars. Coming in at number 3 is Pet Sematary. Alright guys, we're in top 2 territory, and picking between these two is probably the hardest Stephen King decision I've had to make. And if you know me outside of BookTube, like family, friends, stuff like that, you are probably going to be surprised with which order I put these 2 books in, because you know my obsession with one of them and not as much as the other one. But in terms of an overall story, this was a really hard decision, guys. But coming in at number 2 is The Shining. A lot of my friends and family might be thinking this is number 1. It's not. I'm going to tell you what number 1 is after I'm done with this one. This book was probably the one that I should have read right off the bat because of my obsession with the Stanley Kubrick movie. I'm not going to go into the full details of that because my wife and I have something in the works. But whenever I'd go up and visit my great-grandma up in Wisconsin, she had a VHS of The Shining, and that's something I watched probably once a day. Like, literally once a day I'd watch the movie. And when I got older, my dad was like, why don't you read the book? And I said, well, do we have it? And he goes, yeah, I got a paperback. Started reading it, couldn't get into it because it just wasn't interesting to me at the time. And so now that I'm grown and am starting my Stephen King journey, I have read this book, and my goodness, this was a really good book. So, if you know The Shining, y'all know that Jack Torrance is probably my favorite character of all time. Even though he ends up being not good in the end, still absolutely love the character. Jack Nicholson portrayed him as a god, in my opinion. Highly underrated role for him. This book was really good. If you don't know the story, it's about the Torrance family, who the father, Jack, is a recovering alcoholic, and he ends up he got fired from being a teacher because he abused a student. He literally beat the crap out of him for slashing his tires. And what ends up happening is he becomes a writer, and he's been struggling a lot. And so he gets offered to be the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel for the winter season, because they don't open it during the winter season because the owner, Mr. Ullman, says that the cost would be ungodly for plowing it and keeping it clear throughout the winter because it's in Colorado. So they have somebody just watch it throughout the season, the off season, turn the boiler valve to release it, make sure nothing really gets broken before the hard weather hits, make any repairs that need to be repaired. And so Jack takes it and brings his family, Wendy, his wife, and Danny, his son. However, Danny has got a power called the Shining, which he learns from Dick Halloran, the cook of the Overlook Hotel, because Danny's thinking throughout his life that he's the only one with this ability. And throughout the beginning, Danny's being shown like visions of the Overlook Hotel from Tony, which is his, I don't want to say imaginary friend, but they call him his imaginary friend. But it's in the TV miniseries, it's depicted as future Danny, like Danny in the future, and they show he's pretty much warning him like, don't go to the hotel, don't go there, bad things happen there. And it ends up being true. They end up going there, and after, it's not even that long into it, I think it's still only like December or something like that when Jack finally goes mad. And so the old story was one of the old caretakers, Delbert Grady, went crazy, murdered his family with a hatchet, and then I think of the book they say he hung himself, or he took a shotgun shot to the face. He killed himself. So, they're under the impression that it's cabin fever. Ends up being a lot more than that. The hotel's like alive and thriving and like wants Danny. They want his spirit to be at the hotel. In order to do so, they go through Jack, who's a recovering alcoholic, getting him to drink and saying, we want you to, upper management's going to have something opening up, is what they keep offering him. And with him being drunk and in need of like a job and a lot of money, he's like, yeah, sure. What do you need me to do? Kill your son. All right, awesome. Let's do it. And so he ends up, going mad, going crazy. And it's a really good book, and I really recommend it. I know I just blabbed on for a while there talking about it, but it's hard for me not to talk about this. It's difficult, which is why it was hard to put this at number 2. But yeah, this got a solid 5-star rating for me. No question about it, no doubt. If you are interested, again, like I said earlier, we will link the books down below. If you're interested in taking a look at them, giving them a read, go right on ahead. But yeah, The Shining coming in at number 2. Really good book. Alright guys, we are here. The final stop in my Stephen King Top 20 ranks with numero uno, number 1. If you've come this far with me and you haven't heard me talk about it yet, you know that it is number 1. I mean that literally. It is number 1. This book was phenomenal. It didn't even take that long to get going. And there's no like slow points in the story at all. This is a massive book, and it's just so effing good. I mean, there's nothing I can really say about this that's negative. Maybe besides it's like 1,100 pages, but besides that, it's really, really good. So it's a story about the Losers Club, 7 kids who end up becoming really good friends in high school. They get picked on by a group of bullies, and at the same time, each of them encounter this thing that they call it, which also goes by the name of Pennywise the Dancing Clown. It, however, does take more than just the clown figure. It can be a swarm of locusts, Frankenstein, Wolfman. I think it turns into like a leopard, not like a leaping leopard, but like someone with leprosy. It turns into a bunch of different things to freak out the kids. It turns into your biggest fear is pretty much what it does. And it feeds off that fear and kills you. It's been haunting the town of Derry, Maine for every 27 years this thing comes back. And so the first chunk of the book is them like getting the phone call from one of the kids. They all swore that if it came back after they defeated it the first time, that they would come back and beat it again. And so the first time they do it, they think, okay, it's done for, but if it comes back, we're going to get in contact, and we're going to come back and finish this thing. And so one of them ends up staying in the town, and the other 6 go out and do their own thing. They all have separate lives. They're all relatively successful, I would say. But one of them ends up staying and being a librarian. My goodness, I can't think of his name. I don't know why I can't think of this one's name. Anyway, he becomes the librarian in Derry, Maine, and he calls. The first part of the book is him calling each individual person, and then you relive what that person went through as a child dealing with Pennywise. Then you get to where the battle is for them when they're children. And then the second chunk of the book is when they're adults. They all meet back in Derry, and they fight it one more time. Towards the end of the book, there is that one scene. That if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. That I felt like was unnecessary, but, however, very necessary. it solidified their bondage and friendship to defeat Pennywise the first time. It was kind of weird where it fell in the book. The fact that it was in the book was also weird, but it also solidified the friendship, like I said. But I don't know. It's a touchy thing. It could be in there. It could not be in there. Whatever. The way they did it in TV miniseries is they just kind of cut hands, did like, blood brother thing. In the book, it's a lot different. If you've read this, you know what I'm talking about. If you have not, be weary towards the last 200 pages, 100 pages. You'll know the scene as soon as you hear it going on. But this was a 5-star book. There is no doubt about it. No question. Absolutely love this from beginning to end. And this book is like the size of the dictionary. And it's a phenomenal book. I really recommend it. If you've got the time to read it, read it. It's a good book to also make puns like that with. So, but yeah, it wraps up my top 5, coming in at number 1. We're finally there. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've watched from 20 to 1, thank you. It was a long list, and it took a while to get through it and think about what order I need to put them in. But the top 5 was honestly the easiest portion, except for the top 2. That was probably the hardest. But it was really fun to do. And like I said, once I read more, the order is probably going to change, except for maybe these top 5, but we'll see. But yeah, like I said, if you're interested in these books, we'll link them down below. But otherwise, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. What is your favorite Stephen King book? Let me know in the section down below. Comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.